The sharp crack of a hand meeting skin echoed through the quiet diner, cutting through the clinking of silverware and the low hum of conversation. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the red vinyl booths, as gasps filled the room. An elderly woman, her gray hair neatly tied back, stood tall despite the stinging mark on her cheek. She was strong, proud, and carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had lived a long life of battles and survival. But at that moment, she became the target of cruelty she neither deserved nor provoked. The man who had raised his hand against her sneered with arrogance, certain that he could humiliate her without consequence. What he didn't know was that fate had just placed him on the edge of a reckoning he could never imagine. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in standing up for what's right even when it's difficult, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support helps us spread stories that remind the world of the power of compassion and courage. Her name was Evelyn Carter, a 71-year-old retired nurse who had given most of her life to caring for others. She came to the diner every Sunday after church, sitting at the same corner booth, ordering her cup of black coffee and a slice of apple pie. It was her ritual, her quiet celebration of still being alive despite the heartaches she had endured. She had buried her husband years earlier and raised her only child as both mother and father. Through long nights of overtime shifts, through tears she never allowed her son to see, Evelyn had taught him resilience, faith, and honor. That son grew into a man of unshakable character, a man she was deeply proud of, though most of the world didn't know the magnitude of his role. For the man in the doorway, still unseen by the bully, was none other than Marcus Carter, the newly appointed head of Homeland Security. The bully's name was Rick Lawson, a man hardened by bitterness and poor choices. He had grown up fighting for scraps, and instead of turning pain into wisdom, he turned it into poison. He and his two friends had stumbled into the diner, loud and disruptive, laughing cruelly at everyone who dared glance their way. When Evelyn quietly asked them to stop shouting so others could enjoy their meals, Rick felt insulted. His pride, fragile and inflamed, convinced him to put her in her place. So he raised his hand, letting it fall against her cheek, never imagining the consequences of striking an elderly woman who carried herself with more strength than he would ever know. The diner fell silent, the young waiter frozen, the blonde woman in the booth clutching her glass with trembling hands, the men at the counter staring in shock. No one spoke, though everyone's heart pounded with a mix of fear and outrage. Evelyn did not flinch again. She stood there, hands crossed, eyes steady, her voice calm though her face burned from the strike. She had endured worse in her years, racism in hospitals where she worked tirelessly, disrespect from patients she still chose to help, heartbreak and loneliness. But she had never been struck in such a public, demeaning way. She prayed silently for patience, unaware that help had already arrived. The glass door of the diner swung open, and sunlight poured in around a tall figure in a navy blue suit. Marcus Carter stepped inside with the quiet authority of a man who had walked the halls of power, negotiated with generals, and faced crises that could shake a nation. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, immediately locked on the sight of his mother standing rigid while a man towered over her with his hands still raised. For a split second, Marcus felt the ache of being that little boy again, watching his mother work herself to exhaustion just so he could eat. He felt the fire of every injustice she had swallowed, every cruel word she had ignored, every sacrifice she had made so he could rise. And in that instant, the men who had dared strike Evelyn Carter had no idea he was about to stand face to face with the son of the woman he had tried to humiliate. The room seemed to hold its breath. Rick, still puffed with misplaced bravado, turned slightly toward Marcus, dismissing him as just another man in a suit. But the closer Marcus walked, the heavier the air grew. His very presence shifted the atmosphere from one of fear to one of reckoning. Rick's smirk faltered. His friends took small steps backward, sensing the storm they had accidentally invited. Evelyn's eyes softened when she saw her son, though she did not move. She did not need to. Her son had already read every line of pain on her face, every ounce of restraint in her body. Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The strength of his presence alone was enough to command silence. He looked at Rick, and in that gaze was a history Rick could not understand, a lifetime of struggle, of discipline, of protecting not just his mother but a country. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over the men who had dared raise his hand against Evelyn. The diner patrons watched, their hearts pounding, knowing something unforgettable was about to unfold. Rick tried to speak, but his voice cracked. He had spent his life bullying those who could not fight back, but for the first time, he realized he had picked a battle he could not win. Marcus leaned slightly forward, his words sharp, measured, and final. Though no one else knew the full weight of his title, everyone in that diner understood that Rick Lawson had crossed a line no one should ever cross. The two friends quickly grabbed Rick by the arm, dragging him back, muttering excuses, desperate to escape the diner before things spiraled further. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was also filled with something else: relief, admiration, and a renewed faith in justice. Evelyn exhaled slowly, her son's hand resting gently on her shoulder, reminding her she was not alone. For a moment, mother and son simply stood there, bound not just by blood but by a lifetime of battles won together. The crowd in the diner began to stir, whispers of courage and respect filling the air. Some wiped tears from their eyes, others smiled faintly, grateful to witness a moment where love and justice overpowered cruelty. The blonde woman at the booth whispered softly, "She raised a man who defends the whole country," and in that single sentence, the power of Evelyn's life was revealed. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the sacrifices of those who quietly carry the world on their shoulders, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. It is through your support that stories of resilience and dignity can reach more hearts and inspire more souls. Before we end, I want to ask you one special thing. Please comment below. Strength runs in silence. If Evelyn's courage inspired you today,